Over the course of basketball history, there have been several different paths to the NBA that players have taken following high school. The most common one that most people have probably heard of is the high school to college to NBA pipeline. However, there's been quite a few that have opted to play professionally overseas before joining the NBA, and some didn't play anywhere after high school and instead trained entirely on their own until they became draft eligible. However, one path in particular that took the basketball world by storm in the early 2020s was players going from high school right to the NBA G League. And the team most responsible for blazing this particular path to the NBA was none other than the G League Ignite. Founded in 2020, the G League Ignite was created with the intention of developing young players. In particular, the team focused on recruiting young, up-and-coming elite prospects that weren't yet NBA draft eligible, which essentially means players right out of high school or young international prospects. And what really sealed the deal and made it an attractive option for players was the guaranteed six-figure contracts that the team offered its players, with some even going as high as $500,000. And in a pre-NIL college athletics world, this was a very big deal, and is why the team was able to bring in so much young talent. Now, after NIL was implemented and college athletes were allowed to be paid, the business model for the Ignite obviously crumbled and was ultimately canned earlier this year. However, in its brief existence, it was undeniably able to bring in top-notch talent, most notably 11 five-star recruits. And this got me thinking, what happened to all these five-star prospects they recruited? Did they all go on to find success in the NBA, or did the pipe dream they were sold end up doing more harm than good? If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. In the G League Ignite's inaugural 2020 season, the team featured 4 five-star recruits from the 2020 class, and starting things off is Jalen Green. Green was a consensus 5-star recruit on all recruiting sites and was widely considered the #1 player in the class. He played his high school ball for Prolific Prep, where he was an absolute highlight machine. His athleticism was off the charts, and his scoring ability got many people excited about his NBA potential. Upon joining the G League Ignite, Green had very high expectations and was slotted in as a top 5 pick in almost every mock draft going into the season. And fortunately, he was able to live up to those expectations, going on to have a strong season, averaging 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. His performance throughout the season allowed him to maintain his status as a top prospect for the upcoming draft, and he'd go on to be selected 2nd overall by the Houston Rockets with expectations of being the team's franchise player. So far, his NBA career has been pretty polarizing to say the least. He's definitely had his moments where he's played at an all-star level, putting up impressive scoring performances and creating insane highlights. But he's also had his stretches where he's been a legitimate liability to his team, quite literally single-handedly shooting the Rockets out of games with his poor shot selection. He's just a very hot and cold player right now, so the verdict is still kinda up in the air with him. He undeniably has the talent to be a star player in the NBA. It's just a matter of if he can put everything together to take that next step. He's still very young though and has time to continue developing, and I think with Alperen Sengun breaking out and establishing himself as the franchise player more so than Green, I think that should take a little bit of the pressure off of him as well, but only time will tell. After Jalen Green became the first player to sign with the Ignite, the man following closely behind was the small forward out of the Patrick School, Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga was actually originally a part of the 2021 class, but would end up reclassifying to 2020 after an impressive junior season. He was another consensus top 5 recruit, and with his strong and athletic frame, combined with his guard-like skill set, many people were excited to see his development and had him locked in as a future top pick in the NBA draft. But before that, he'd have to prove himself on the Ignite, which he certainly ended up doing, serving as the perfect sidekick to Green, averaging 15 points and 7 rebounds a game. And similar to Green, Kuminga would go on to be a top pick in the 2021 draft, being selected 7th overall by the Golden State Warriors. His NBA career did get off to a rather slow start as he struggled to find a role within the Warriors rotation his first couple seasons, but his patience did pay off as he managed to make a big leap this most recent year, averaging 16 points and 4 rebounds a game. And with us now approaching the tail end of this Warriors dynasty, Kuminga looks to be a key piece for Golden State moving forward as they look to build the team back up again. I'm honestly not quite sure how high his ceiling is and if he'll ever be a franchise level player, but it certainly looks like he'll be a strong contributor in the NBA for many seasons to come. Up next was the Ignite's first big man prospect, Isaiah Todd, a power forward hailing from Word of God Christian Academy. In the 2020 class, Todd was a 5-star recruit on all major recruiting sites, ranking as high as the number 15 overall player in the country according to ESPN. He fit the mold as the perfect prototypical big man for the modern NBA, being highly athletic and mobile for his size, while also displaying flashes as a perimeter shooter. After originally committing to play his college hoops at the University of Michigan, he'd eventually decided to forgo college and sign with the Ignite, citing being able to learn from pros CEOs, NBA coaches, and trainers as the main reasons behind his decision. And in his first season of the Ignite, he initially got off to a pretty slow start, but he did manage to pick up the slack as the year went on. And he was able to finish off his season putting up pretty solid averages of 12 points and 4 rebounds a game. Upon declaring for the NBA draft, he wasn't rated nearly as high by scouts as compared to his two previously discussed teammates, Green and Kuminga. However, he did have a lot of tools and potential that made him a draftable prospect, and he'd go on to be selected just outside of the first round, being selected 31st overall by the Milwaukee Bucks, and then immediately traded to the Indiana Pacers. He would then be a part of another trade shortly after that sent him to his hometown team, the Washington Wizards. And he'd go on to spend 2 seasons in DC, appearing in 18 games, averaging just 1 point and 1 rebound a game in limited minutes. Following his time with the Wizards, he hasn't seen any NBA action since and has bounced around to various teams, last being waived by the Memphis Grizzlies in September of 2023. He'd then actually make a reunion with the G League Ignite, signing with them for the 2023-2024 season. But now with the Ignite disbanding, Isaiah Todd is currently without a home and as of this video remains unsigned. And the last 5-star in this 2020 G League Ignite class was the Alaskan-born point guard Daishawn Nix out of Trinity International School. Nix was yet another consensus 5-star recruit in the 2020 class, with 2 of the major recruiting sites ranking him as a top 15 player in the class. In high school, he was one of those guys that wasn't super athletic or overly flashy, but you could tell he just had a great feel for the game, knew how to play at his own pace, and was a well-rounded player, especially standing out as a facilitator. He originally was committed to UCLA, but instead signed with the Ignite, claiming it to be the best decision for him and his family. Now, among all the other 5-star recruits on the team, he would end up being the least productive, but he did still show off his jack-of-all-trades skill set, averaging 8 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game, declaring for the draft at the conclusion of the season. However, despite having a solid all-around season, it unfortunately wouldn't be quite good enough to get him onto NBA radars as he'd end up going undrafted. But he was quickly scooped up by the Houston Rockets, and he'd spend a couple seasons there, splitting time between the NBA and their G League affiliate. And in the limited NBA action he did see, he wasn't anything great, but he did show some flashes of being a competent NBA player. He spent this most recent season on a 2-way contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but unfortunately did take a step back in terms of playing time and production. He'll definitely have a lot to prove in this upcoming season if he wants to show that he belongs in the NBA, so hopefully he'll kick things up a notch during this critical point in his basketball career. Moving on now to the 2021 G League Ignite, there were a total of 3 5-star recruits signed to the roster, hoping to build on the previous season. And serving as the highest rated player of the trio, we have shooting guard Jaden Hardy out of Coronado High School. Jaden was another consensus 5-star recruit and top 5 player in the country, with ESPN ranking him as high as the 2nd overall player in the 2021 class. After coming off a dominant junior season, Hardy would make the decision to actually opt out of playing his senior year. But despite not even playing, he was still considered one of the best recruits in the country. And after signing with the Ignite, he was expected to be one of the premier performers on the roster. Fortunately for Hardy, he was able to put his talent on display with an impressive stat line of 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Looking at his talent and skill sets on their own, Hardy definitely showed flashes of being a top 10 prospect for the upcoming draft. However, the major weakness in his game, pointed out by scouts, was his inefficiency, shooting just 35% from the field and 27% from 3. And unfortunately, this would be a major reason for him falling in the draft all the way to the 2nd round, being selected 37th overall by the Sacramento Kings and then traded to the Dallas Mavericks. And so far in his first 2 seasons with the Mavericks, he's been a steady contributor off the bench and has shown flashes for being a legitimate shooting threat, hitting threes at a respectable 37% rate. His production and efficiency did slightly drop off his 2nd season, but I can definitely see him bouncing back and having a strong season in year 3. So overall, while he likely won't become an all-star caliber player, I do think he's going to keep improving and have himself a long career as a solid contributor in the NBA. Up next is arguably the most well-known player to ever play for the G League Ignite, and that's the point guard out of Kell High School, Scoot Henderson. Scoot was a 5-star in every major recruiting site and a top 15 player, with ESPN ranking him as high as the number 7 player in the class. Like just discussed Jaden Hardy, Scoot would opt out of his senior season after a monster junior year, which thrusted him into the national spotlight, and he was easily the most electrifying and explosive player in the whole class, just having insane highlights and frequently getting comparisons to guys like Russell Westbrook and Derrick Rose. So despite being ranked lower than quite a few guys in the class, he was unquestionably one of the most viral and well-known, which would end up carrying over to his time with the Ignite. Now, Scoot's situation is a bit different from every other player mentioned so far due to him signing with the Ignite after his junior season. And with the rule that a player must be 1 year removed from their senior year of high school to become draft eligible, Scoot would have to wait 2 years before declaring, thus leading him to signing a 2-year contract with the Ignite as opposed to the 1-year deals most of the other players got. And in his 2 years with the Ignite, he saw great development, averaging 16 points, points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and becoming one of the top prospects in the 2023 draft. And in the draft, he'd go on to be selected with the 3rd overall pick by the Portland Trail Blazers. In his rookie year for the Blazers, as is common with many first-year players, Scoot definitely had his fair share of struggles and growing pains early on. However, he definitely showed lots of development and promise in the latter half of the season and showed flashes of being an all-star caliber player. There's still lots of improvements to be made, especially in regards to his efficiency, but overall, Blazers fans should be very excited for his future, and I'm very interested to see how he continues to develop moving forward. Finishing up as the final 5-star in this 2021 Ignite class, we've got the big man out of Hillcrest Prep, Michael Foster Jr. Foster is the first player so far that actually wasn't a consensus 5-star recruit, with Rivals.com only rating him as a 4-star recruit, but outside of that, many viewed him as a 5-star talent, with ESPN even ranking him as the 9th overall player in the class. He was another guy that matched the profile of a modern NBA big man with his athleticism and shooting ability, but he also flashed as an impressive ball handler for his size as well, which got many scouts excited for his potential. And after releasing himself from his prior commitment to play at Arizona State, Foster would go on to sign with the Ignite, becoming one of the primary big men on the team. And he'd go on to have a really solid season, averaging 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. However, despite his impressive play, Foster would end up going undrafted, eventually being picked up by the Philadelphia 76ers on a 2-way contract. And after a season in Philly in which he literally played just 1 minute the entire season, he'd be released and wasn't able to crack another NBA lineup again. And after a couple seasons in the G League, Foster signed to play professionally in Puerto Rico earlier this year, likely indicating the end of his NBA career. Obviously, the door isn't fully closed on him making an NBA comeback, but as of now, his professional career has certainly been underwhelming. Moving on now to the 2022 G League Ignite, this iteration of the roster welcomed only one new 5-star to the team, and that was the Canadian small forward Leonard Miller out of Fort Erie International Academy. Now, his situation is quite different from everyone else's since his time at Fort Erie was actually a post-grad year, meaning he had already graduated high school, but then played an additional season at a prep school. So he was NBA draft eligible after his time there based on the rules, but he was still technically ranked and rated as part of the 2022 high school class. Like I said, his situation is kind of weird, so hopefully you're able to follow along there, but based on the circumstances, I figured I'd include him in the video as well. In the 2022 class, Miller was rated as a 5-star recruit on a couple different recruiting sites and was even ranked as the number 2 overall player in the class according to On3. He was a fluid and dynamic scorer with good size on the wing, the type of players that are highly sought after in today's NBA, so many people definitely kept their eyes on his development over the next couple years. And after forgoing college and signing with the Ignite, many people expected his scoring abilities to transfer over well, and his scoring did end up carrying over, averaging 18 points a game alongside 11 rebounds, which would be good enough to get him onto NBA radars. And in the 2023 draft, Miller would be selected with the 33rd pick by the San Antonio Spurs, and then traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. His rookie season really wasn't noteworthy, playing primarily in the G League and seeing very sparing minutes in the NBA. Obviously, with him coming off his rookie season with barely any playing time, an assessment on him really can't be made yet, but he's obviously a very talented player, and I'm interested to see how much the Timberwolves incorporate him into the rotation next season if they decide to hold on to him. And now to finish up, we have the most recent and final 2023 G League Ignite roster, which featured their last 3 5-star recruits. And kicking things off with this final batch of 5-star talents is the power forward Ron Holland out of Duncanville High School. Holland was a consensus 5-star recruit and top 5 player in the class, with 24/7 Sports ranking him as the number 1 player in the class. He had all the physical tools you want to see in a top prospect and had future number 1 draft pick upside if he could put everything together. And entering his first season with the Ignite, many mock drafts had him projected as a top pick in the upcoming draft. And after averaging 18 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 steals a game that season, he was able to keep his name in that conversation as one of the top draft prospects. The hype had fallen off just a little bit with other quick rising prospects coming into the picture, but Holland still had all the tools and upside worthy of a top pick in the draft. And in the 2024 draft, he'd be selected 5th overall by the Detroit Pistons. Admittedly, I do think this is kinda a weird landing spot for him, but at the same time, he's going to have plenty of time to develop and be able to make an immediate impact for a young and rebuilding Pistons team. And he did look really good in the Summer League, showing lots of versatility and 2-way upside, so I'm very excited to see how his rookie season plays out. Up next is someone that's probably one of the most intriguing players in this recent draft class, and that's the small forward Matas Buzelis out of Sunrise Christian Academy. In the 2023 class, Buzelis was a consensus 5-star recruit, being ranked as high as the number 4 player in the class by Rivals.com. And what made him such a hot commodity was his pro-level skill set, possessing scoring versatility and elite shooting while standing at 6'8". Because, as talked about earlier with some of the other players, long, athletic scoring wings are a valuable asset in today's NBA. And in his lone season with the Ignite, after coming back from some early season injuries, he put his versatility on full display, averaging 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. And with his combination of production and skill set, he was without a doubt considered a first-round prospect. But in terms of his specific draft projections, he was a bit all over the place, with some experts predicting him to be a late lottery or mid-first-round pick, and others having him as high as a potential top 5 selection. In the end, he'd wind up being selected 11th overall by the Chicago Bulls, which many people considered to be a steal for them. And after a really solid summer league with the Bulls, there's quite a bit of excitement and intrigue around him as he goes into his rookie season. Whether or not he'll become an all-star caliber player is obviously up in the air, but he certainly has all the talent and skills to be a solid contributor in the league for the foreseeable future. And now, finishing off with the G League Ignite's 11th and final 5-star recruit, we've got the power forward Tyler Smith. Now, he's another guy that took a very unconventional path to the NBA. He originally played his high school ball at George Bush High School up through his sophomore year. However, at the conclusion of his sophomore season, Smith would make the decision to leave high school and sign a 2-year contract with Overtime Elite, a newly formed basketball league designed for players aged 16 to 20 years old. And during his time with Overtime Elite, he was able to maintain his status as a top recruit in the 2023 class. Now, due to Overtime Elite being considered a professional league, this made Smith ineligible to play in college, due to the NCAA's rules regarding amateurism. So naturally, the next best choice for a player of his status was to sign with the G League Ignite, and in his lone season with the team, he put up a respectable stat line of 13 points and 5 rebounds a game, on pretty good shooting percentages. And at the conclusion of the season, Smith was projected as a mid-first round pick. However, according to reports, he ended up struggling mightily during the pre-draft process, apparently playing poorly in various combine scrimmages and pro day workouts. And this would unfortunately cause him to fall in the draft all the way to the second round, eventually being selected 33rd overall by the Milwaukee Bucks. He'd go on to have a pretty solid summer league overall, nothing bad, nothing great, but I do think he's in a pretty favorable situation with the Bucks. For one, he'll be able to learn and get mentorship from Giannis, arguably the best power forward in the NBA. And realistically, outside of Giannis, there's really not any other guys on the roster that'll be eating up minutes at power forward. So I think Smith is definitely going to see quite a bit of action his rookie season. Plus, Giannis and Smith's playstyles are actually quite complementary of each other. So I think it's definitely possible we see lineups with both players on the floor together. So he'll definitely be a rookie I'm going to keep a close eye on this upcoming season. So that was every 5-star recruit to ever play for the G League Ignite and where they are now. As I'm sure is obvious, all of these players are still very young and very early into their basketball careers, so we're still at least a few years away from being able to give an actual assessment on how good they turned out. But they're all extremely talented players with tons of potential, so I'm very excited to see how they continue to develop moving forward. Overall, although the G League Ignite was short-lived, in the end, I think it served its purpose well of developing young athletes and providing another effective pathway to the NBA. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. If you have any thoughts on the Ignite or any players in this video, be sure to leave a comment down below, along with any other video suggestions you might have. This is HCP signing off. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.